Well, good afternoon. I'm going to start with my presentation as soon as possible with a video. I'm going to show you a video and then I'm going to ask a question to you. So please pay attention.
¿Os habéis fijado bien?
Have you paid attention? This game is from 1972. Many of us have played to this game, 1972. This game, 10 years later, this game had generated $3,000 million. And this is a game in which they couldn't even design a ball. They just put a square that was simulating to be a ball. This is the first digital game that was commercialized in the history. And what happened here? Someone said, okay, we would need to update the quality of games. We should need to update that. They didn't believe it. And a few years ago, they declared themselves on bankruptcy. So, with stories such as this one, it is normal that we feel a very common feeling nowadays. I'm not talking about joy, sorrow, of anger. It is fear. Everyone is talking to us about the fear to change, to failure. But what are the most popular fears here in Spain? Fear of embarrassment, of fear to what other people are going to say about us. These fears stop us because people are saying we have companies, universities, digital, saying that the digital tsunami is coming. I'm here in order to talk to you about this, and I have evidence that shows that we are not going to experience a tsunami. Do you know what's the speed of a tsunami? It's hard to think about speeds if we don't use a reference. What's the speed of a tsunami compared to the most fast mammal in the world? 120 kilometers per hour. It is even faster than that. It is even faster than the current speed of the Hyperloop or the current speed of one of the fastest car in the world, which can reach more than 400 kilometers per hour. Do you know what's the speed of a tsunami? It may reach 907 kilometers per hour, which is the speed of a Boeing 787. This means that when a tsunami arrives, it is very difficult to get a warning, to be warned in advance. If you are warned, it's going to be just a few minutes before it arrives. But we have been warned for a long time that the revolution is coming, that the industrial revolution is coming. We are experiencing the fourth industrial revolution. This is why I'm also scared. Everything is changing very fast. Everything is changing a lot. And whenever I'm scared, I ask myself, what would have Sastre said? This man that knew a lot about fear. He would have said, don't be afraid, Silvia. Everyone is scared. A person that doesn't feel fear is not a normal person, is a psychopath. So you need to learn in order to manage your fears in a smart way. He would have said, what are you looking when you see this picture? When you see this picture? It's true that everything is changing when I am analyzing my fears, but is it changing as fast as ever in history? Let's think about the year 1901. Do you know how much richness came from the agriculture? 46% of the GDP came from agriculture. Today is not more than 5%. And do you know how many people were working in the agricultural sector? 96%. Everything changes fast. That's true. But things are changing, have been changing for a long time. And if we look at the future, we see that regarding economy, technologies such as artificial intelligence are helping us, are going to help to grow wealthness. And artificial intelligence is going to increase GDP by 14%, and the cloud is going to decrease energy consumption of all the machines that are doing so many operations for us by 40%. So this is why when I'm scared, I think, so what else would have he said? He would have said, you're concerned about employment, you're concerned about growth. You know that there's going to be growth, but what's happening with employment? Companies are growing, but what about employment? He would say, take a look at what's going to happen. Is it true that more than 40% of employments are going to disappear, as Oxford University was saying? Because robotics, the cost of robotics is less and less. And there is going to be a 22% extra reduction. Of course, we are going to have more robots. Most industrial tasks are done by robots. 45% of tasks will be done by robots in 10 years. So how am I going to be positive, taking into account these statistics? When the University of Oxford did that study, everybody got scared, but according to the OECD, 80% of jobs may disappear as a result of all these transformations. So how am I not going to be scared, especially thinking about Spain? Since 2013, technical degrees have 40% less students. How am I not going to be scared? Manpower publishes reports annually, and in the last report, they said in Spain, 2.6 million new employments are going to emerge, but 26% of positions are not covered. And in some other European countries, the average figure is 40-something%. We have some disadjustments that affect especially women, because just 23% of people that enroll on technical careers are women. We have a problem here. Besides that, we have a problem because what are we finding at the social levels? We feel lonely. In fact, many countries are creating ministries in order to treat that. In Spain, 4.7 million people are living alone on their own. So we may think that it's a personal reason, a personal decision, but this about 3.3% of these 4.7 million feel lonely frequently. They haven't chosen being alone. This is what they found. And this feeling of loneliness increases by 14% the possibilities of dying. These are data of the WHO. Is this where technology is leading us? Spain is the second country in Europe in which there are more people dying by doing selfies. However, we are not the worst at that. Who do you think is going to be the leader of this ranking? Portugal. Is this where technology is leading us? Well, I wanted to remind you that obviously all the revolutions are traumatic processes in the short term, but the problem that we have is that this trauma sometimes doesn't let us see the other side of the coin. And sometimes when I'm scared, also I wonder, what would Darwin say about my fears? What would he say? And he would say, Silvia, fear is a survival mechanism. So use it in order to become stronger, but try to analyze the positive side of things. And what's the positive side? I'm going to analyze employment again. Only 1% of jobs of a decade ago remain nowadays. Do you know anyone that's working as a human radar? This picture is from 1991 and 1919, sorry. Also another different profession. This one disappeared in 1987 because of now we have electronic lighting. Other employments. Do you know waking women? This this employment existed and it disappeared in 1987 because of different inventions. Sorry, 17. Because of different inventions. So this is also the consequence of different revolutions, so we cannot be blinded by the negative side. Also, more statistics. What the OECD is saying, 87% of jobs that we know currently could disappear in a decade, but they are also saying that by then, after all these years, 85% of jobs that will emerge in the future, we don't know them yet. And the Economic Forum say this, yes, it is true, 75 million jobs are going to disappear, but the same source says and that 133 millions will appear. So the result is positive, the balance is positive. So why do we always remember the bad news? We don't know the jobs that we are going to have in the future, but we know the competencies that will be demanded: creativity, mathematical skills, teamworking, emotional intelligence, technological skills, and we know how to prepare for that changes, because this is always also going to affect to our country. We have to use technology responsibly, in a responsible way, but socially this is positive too, because I want to remind you what happened with technology in the last years. These are just a couple of examples. Extreme poverty, for example. Do you remember the figures of extreme poverty? In 1870, 90% of world population was poor. Now the figure is way less. And also about healthcare. If we think about people at hospitals, 70% of people at hospitals would be in intensive care. And 30 years ago, these people would end up dying. These are some positive things that we can obtain from technology. This is a revolution that is worth it, because the positive side exceeds the negative side, and we need to adapt to it so that this happens as soon as possible and the trauma is the minimum possible. And how am I going to adapt to the progress? And how can I minimize the social trauma? I have to use technology responsibly, and I have to be able to innovate with it in order to generate business and jobs, employment. But how? How can I adapt to technology? The response is also given by technology. Of course, we're going to start by a technology which is virtual reality and augmented reality. And I'm going to talk about a film, Terminator. I want to remind you about a film. Augmented reality and virtual reality can bring me to a world that doesn't exist and in which I can overlap information. This is not new technology. This is a mature technology. Most of technologies of this revolution imply that these technologies are being democratized. This film started being filmed in 1984, and recently it was recognized by the government of the US as historical, aesthetical, and scientific, because it explains scientists and society how this technology could evolve, because Terminator was wearing a helmet that overlapped information on the real world, which is augmented reality. This reality is from the 40s. Pilots on planes were driving the plane, and sometimes they had to take life or death solutions. Should I turn my head in order to look at the enemy, or should I just look at the dashboard? They had to do both things at the same time. That was the reality. So scientists invented this display that solved that problem, But this is not perfect. This was not perfect because at the end of the day, the pilots had headaches because of the stiffness of the neck. So science and technology is progressing. And in the 80s, the 90s, they came up with this innovation, with this helmet. Pilots could move their heads. But it was not perfect because it was too heavy. So then they came up with this invention. Some lenses from Innovera. The US Army is investigating, is researching these lenses, and you can wear them and you can look at what's closer, what's farther, and if there's a drone, it would overlap the information of the drone on the lenses. And how can we use this socially? Mark Zuckerberg was asked this question: why are you spending so much money on this technology that for us is leisure? And he said, because with that technology, you are going to be able to experiment impossible things. This is why this is going to change education, or at least it should change education, because we've studied the goddess, kings by heart. We've learned these things by heart, but now we are going to be able to experience that realities. This is going to generate motivation, and this is going to make children pay more attention to their teachers. These are wonderful technologies, and they work so well that the WHO are using this technology in order to explain how diseases such as Ebola work, or what you can do, or how you can react when you find someone suffering from this disease. Reading about that would take a long time, and this technology could shorten this time. This is why this is working. So technologies let us know that we have to be optimistic about this, because this is going to bring many opportunities that we have to make the most of. But we also want to know how to adapt from from the business point of view. And this is why I'm going to talk to you about the Internet of Things. Having sensors connected to the Internet, sensors that capture information and send information to the network. These are sensors that are behind all these so-called smart objects, smart watches, smart vehicles. They all have sensors that detect the environment, and for example, in the case of cars, they can react consequently. This is the Internet of Things. This technology also brings hope in the healthcare sector. Why? Because if we had these sensors in chronic ill people, the treatment cost would reduce by 20%. So are we already imagining the savings that this would imply in a society that is getting older and older? This would imply saving and a longer life expectancy. For example, another problem is pollution, because smart buildings reduce CO2 pollution by 40%. So thanks to all the people that decide to innovate with things like these ones that may be the future, we may start to understand that there are many things coming. For example, this is MIT clothing that you are wearing, and while you are reading a book, you are going to experience the same feelings as the main character of the book. Is this going to evolve? Maybe yes, maybe no, but this shows that there are many more things that we are going to invent. With these technologies, with the Internet of Things, we are closer to the world of Philip K. Have you read his book? Blade Runner was based on a book of Philip K. Dick that, besides the book in which Blade Runner was based, he also wrote Ubik. He describes a world in this book in which things were working like our current society, but objects were invisible, more and more invisible. Mark Weiser read that book in 1991 and was amazed, because he said, this makes sense. And he wrote an article talking about the ubiquitous society, ubiquitous. And this is now what we're calling the Internet of Things. And this is bringing growth, especially thanks to 5G. We're going to have many data that are going to generate many employment, many jobs. In this profession of experts, 4.5 million people will be specialized in this sector, and this would multiply the workforce by 15 compared to the last 4 years. So many new jobs and employment opportunities. And with platforms such as Arduino, we can start collaborating. In Black Friday, they had some discounts, and with just 23 euros you can start trying out and playing and seeing how it works. You can start playing with door openings, plant watering, and this is a sector which has a lot of potential. But of course, we need to make sure from the point of view of cybersecurity that this can progress, because Internet of Things also brings some problems, because every object which is connected to the Internet may be hacked. We are watching this at the news. The vice president of the US between 2001 and 2008 was complaining recently because his doctors had told him that his hard device could be hacked. And also cars, vehicles without keys have been hacked, and we've watched in the news that there are students that are hacking his grades. So we need experts that ensure that technology can progress, but in a safe way. This is why I really like saying that who has a techie friend has a treasury. And if his friend is an expert in cybersecurity, even more. But we're still talking about technology, right? We are still talking about how to link the business, social, and technical words. And now it's time to talk about gamification, the use of gaming or leisure techniques in different areas. This is a technology that comes from the military sector, the military world, because they had a problem that many companies are having. They were unable to attract talent. The military sector needed talent, and as it wasn't able, they weren't able to achieve it, they start doing different campaigns. And in 2002, they decided to talk to someone called Kasi Kadinsky, who was a professor of economy in the West Point Academy, and they asked him, how can we solve this problem? And he had an idea. What about making a game which is so real that it is impossible to forget, and that at the same time provides an intense experience that lets you know how a real soldier is experiencing? Let's launch a game, a real game. Multiplayer, free, real game, American's Army. They launched it in 2005, and 3 years later, they had solved the problem. They got new soldiers, and this is why there are more and more people going through gamification process in order to start working in companies. There are more and more companies that are using this type of systems, because Plato already said that a person learns more by playing for 1 hour than just learning for half a year. David Hunter, a geography teacher, had a big problem in his class because children were bored of studying the capitals, the rivers, the seas. So he decided to create a game called Zombie-Based Learning, in which you had to run away from zombies. And the more geography you knew, the easier it was for you to escape. This was a huge success, and journals such as Cell that published a report saying that dyslexic children between 7 and 11 playing video games learn how to read faster and with more accuracy. So video games are working, and they're also working for children with cancer, thanks to games such as Remission. In Spanish hospitals are using these games also since 2006. and children can understand this way what a cancer is and how to fight this disease. Chemio is one of their weapons in order to fight against malignant cells. And it multiplied by 3 the feeling of the child of surviving to that cancer. And this had a direct impact on his life expectancy. And this also works very well in the scientific cooperation world. Scientists that are studying and working and trying to look for the AIDS virus, they found a problem with protease. In order to advance, they needed to know the structure of that element. And it has a 3D element, which is like a puzzle in the end. Scientists were trying to solve that structure. They were working on that for 15 years, and they started talking to the Washington University. They had a puzzle platform then there called Foldit. They put the protease, and in 3 weeks, 40,000 people started playing and found out the structure of that element. So there are things that we couldn't imagine because of our prejudices. But of course, this should work in the university environment. For example, in the Kaplan University, they have many adults playing while learning, and grades have increased by 9%. Failures have decreased by 16%, and people spend 155% more of time in class. So studying doesn't have to be boring for children or adults. But here we have some problems too, because when launching this type of projects, we may have some risks too. And statistics say that 86% of cybersecurity projects have problems. Why? Because if you want to launch technology projects that act on human behaviors, for example, increasing motivation, you need to know people very well. What does it mean? We are living in a world in which we will need many technology professionals, but we will also need people with humanity knowledge, digitalized humanity talents. There will be a space for all of them. Humanities are not going to disappear. And of course, now it's time to talk about robots. What's robotics saying about the future? What are they teaching us about the changes that are happening? Okay, let's start talking about the origin of robots. The name is very interesting. Do you know where does it come from, the name robot? From the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Robota meant forced labor or slave. And in 1848, slavery was abolished. In 1919, this word was used again in a play, in a theater play called Robots Universales Rosum. This play talks about some robots created by humans in order for them to work less. This was a huge success. It was translated into many languages, and it made the word robot popular again. So robots moved from science fiction to reality. And in 1939, we saw the first robot that had appeared previously in films. The first two-legs robot. This robot could walk without endangering anyone. He could say some words, and he could chew gums, and he was also able to smoke. And the science advanced too, and in 2005 we met Creo, the first Sony robot and the first robot in history who was able to run. This means that the robot could raise both legs at the same time. And companies started being more interesting because this mobility issue was solved. And then scientists started paying attention to the heads of the robots and created robots with sympathy, such as Kirobo, that are here in order to solve the problems of Japanese astronauts that felt alone when they were on a mission, on a space mission. Now they have Kirobo in order to keep them company. And they are working. And the robots may work too at schools because robots are like toys. And the mix of robots and Angry Birds increased awareness of increased concentration of children between 9 and 26 minutes. And this is not endangering the tasks of the teacher. This is just going to help the teacher generate more motivation, and they work very well also with the elderly. This is a robot called Hugo. I had the chance to meet him in Coimbra, and this is a robot that keeps the elderly company. And it is working very well. And we may be wondering, in which type of society are we giving robots to the elderly in order to keep them company? This is not a replacement. It is just a tool that we may use while we are solving a problem, a bigger problem. And it is working. Of course, it is working. Also, in many malls, we have these robots, and even in banks, we have robots and doing financial operations. And we may wonder, so where are we going? Where are robots going to get in our lives? I would like to ask you, what would you do if tomorrow we are told that they are going to display many robots on the streets in order to control traffic and give and fine those that commit sanctions? Well, this is what they've done in El Congo.
Pero este robot de 2,5 metros de altura, pues reales al caos real del tráfico en Kinshasa. Desde junio del año pasado.
Je suis Congo, l'unique robot de la circulation routière au monde, et même le plus beau. Mais seulement, je ne touche pas l'argent pour mon rendement, jamais de l'argent.
El robot es bueno. Cuando detiene el tráfico puedes ver que todo el mundo frena y que los peatones pueden cruzar sin problema. Gracias a Dios porque lo inventaron. La policía de tránsito nos molesta mucho. Dejen que los robots hagan el trabajo.
When technology solves a problem, it's very well accepted. And what is happening is that sometimes policemen robots have been able to reduce corruption, because sometimes people didn't know where money that they gave to the policemen was going. But does it mean that robots are going to steal our jobs? No, I want to remind you what happened recently in China. In the year 2000, it was fashionable to hire robot waiters. It was wonderful because with the salary of 1 year salary of a real waiter, you could get a robot for life. But it was not perfect because they were crashing from time to time. The motricity reduced little by little. And in many occasions, they threw food on the clients. So the new fashion thing to do is to hire these robots. So does this mean that we are not going to have robots in restaurants? No. This means this is the same thing that happened with this robot, Flippy, who was hired in order to serve burgers and was fired a couple of hours ago or a couple of days ago. It depends on the person you asked. But he was fired because Flippy is a collaborative robot and he can do 300 hamburgers per hour, but working in a team. So the company has said that they are going to hire again that robot. This robot was also fired because people that were in a hurry wanted a beer as soon as possible. And people were complaining because it was too emotional, it wanted to give a lot of hugs, and people ended up avoiding the robot. And what can I tell you about these robots that have also been fired in this restaurant and hotel in Japan? This is the Hena Hotel, the most efficient hotel in the world. They've fired half of the robots because they were causing problems. They are not as efficient as humans at doing some tasks, and because some robots such as security, was programmed in order to follow instruction. And when the robot could listen to someone snoring, thought it was a command, and the robot awake the people snoring in order to ask again what he was saying. But this doesn't mean that robots are not going to make sense in hotels, restaurants, etc. This means that we are living a task relocation era. Many tasks are done better by robots, but many other tasks are going to be done better by humans, especially now that we're going to have more time in our workplace. So we have to see the tasks that are done better by robots in order for let them do that and devote our time to other things that can bring more value. This is a renovation. And which tasks am I talking about?
Now it's when we're going to talk about AI, how their head works, how ours work. AI is the evolution of big data because in artificial intelligence I have many data and I can ask many questions, but there are some nuances because AI can learn. AI is more and more intuitive, more and more creative. It is not limited to do some predictions and obtain information. Over time, it learns and can help me to do many things thanks to those data. There are some places, such as in LA, where they analyze the movement of phones, and then you have a list of possible criminals. I mean, people who may commit a crime, and they go to the places and tell, hey, we're watching you, and the rate of criminality has been reduced. So technology is great to reduce a huge problem that we are facing in Europe, because it is clear that one of the main skills for children and teenagers is mathematical skills. So how good they are at mathematics. The Bank of Spain says that your mathematical skills explain your salary up to 22%, and in Europe 60% of university students have mathematical anxiety, so some stress that they feel when they have to solve these problems. What happens today with kids? There are some applications that use AI and analyze the evolution of the kid and adjust the pace of learning. One of the applications reduced the learning time by a third. So, of course, they work to solve these problems. And in the medicine world, they are bringing up advances that we couldn't have imagined. I have seen a platform that Mendelian that does what Dr. House used to do in the TV series. It diagnoses a rare disease in 7 years. Now, thanks to Mendelian platform or similar ones, you can diagnose it in 7 minutes. So it took 7 years before, and now 7 minutes. It gets the information, it compares it with all the literature, and then it makes an estimation on a rare disease. Thanks to AI and the University of Nottingham, we have the possibility to have the information on who is going to have a sudden heart attack. And if you know you're going to have it in 10 years, you can start working on it. And a sudden heart attack gives you a life expectancy of 10 minutes. AI is also enabling cars to carry out employment interviews. This car uses an AI and carried out an employment interview to know if you were the perfect candidate. And it is not replacing anyone. It is the first stage, same as companies do with other tools. They also help companies to look for the best candidate for a project in a selection stage. But this belongs to the past. We want to know what awaits for us in the future. That's why I want to remind you of recent facts. We were saying that AI is friendly and it is also intuitive. In the last year, we got to know that it won 5 world champions of poker. And it is also creative. I want to remind the case of Schubert. The most famous symphony by Schubert was not completed, and because he had syphilis and couldn't finish it. And there is a smartphone which has analyzed, thanks to AI, what his technical and emotional movements were, and it has calculated the end of that symphony, just a smartphone from a company. So you may think, and where is this getting us? Because we were talking about employment, but what tasks can I perform better than a robot? So it is time to talk about chatbots, those tools which interact and talk like people. Chatbots were founded in the 70s. The first one was ISA, which was an AI. If it detected a keyword in the question you were asking and gave you some answers, it happened the same as therapists. But everything is advancing, and Alan Turing did a test and said the day a machine passes this test, we can say it reasons as a flesh and bone person, and it was passed in 2017. It made judges believe that they were talking with a person, and these tools are used in the United States in order to know what legal case lawyers are going to accept and also how to defend it. Currently, 85% of operations through banking operations will be done by chatbots and next year. But today, 69% of people prefer to talk with chatbots rather than with human beings when it comes to short response questions. But what is going to happen with us? I'm going to remind you what happened the day that University of Conrad asked, what would happen if two AI talk to each other? Do you know what happened? That 10 to 15 minutes later, they started to argue. Why? Technology is made based on us, and it is not perfect because we are not perfect, and these chatbots were turned off, as many others. We have cases of AI. The AI from Google becomes racist. Turn it off. So the same by Facebook. The AI by Facebook was created to negotiate, and when they are talking to a colleague, they start negotiating with another language. So they started creating new languages, and they had to be turned off. So what's going on with those technologies? We perform some tasks much better than machines, but we need to pay attention to those things that make us more human. So what makes us human will be very difficult to be replaced, because we can contribute to those with that humanity that we have. But they can take those tasks which are tedious and automated, and we need to pay attention to those tasks which make us different from machines. So we can wonder, can I do it also? Can I also join this revolution, the fourth digital transformation? Can I innovate with technology regardless of my studies? What do I have to do? How can I join? What is the key? And to reply to you, I want to tell you the story of Alan Turing and Warren McCulloch when they met. Do you know that moment when you meet someone and you don't feel chemistry between you? And that's what happened when they met. Warren McCulloch was a man with a lot of creativity. He talked a lot, and he was convinced that someday he would program a logic mathematical model on how our brain works. And Alan Turing didn't like it at all. Alan Turing didn't know the story of Warren McCulloch because he was a very lucky man. His family had a lot of money, and he devoted his youth studying psychology, mathematics, and medicine, which is a very different story from this guy's story. He was passionate about maths, and his father, who didn't share his passion, insisted once over and over that he had to start working as his colleagues did. When he was 11 years old, they had a huge argument, and he hid in the local library, where he spent 3 days and 3 nights reading this book, Principia Mathematica, which is considered the top work of modern mathematicals. And he detected some mistakes and decided to inform authors. One of them who had received a Nobel in 1950. Can you imagine the face of the Nobel laureate when he knew that a 11-year-old kid had found some mistakes? He was so glad that he invited him to study his doctoral thesis, something that didn't happen because of his father. 3 years later, he escaped. He left his house, and when he has no place where to sleep, he met Warren McCulloch and went to live with him and his family, and they worked together. And then in 1943, they designed the first logical mathematical model of our brain functioning. And that moment is considered the AI, the modern AI conception, is the moment that when this technology was born, a technology that changes everything. This is a story that proves that anyone can join this revolution, but you need determination, effort, and time. That is why I'm going to give you 4 pieces of advice in order for you to join the 4th Industrial Revolution. First, do not be afraid. We saw it in the beginning. It is not a problem. We need to know how to manage it in an intelligent way. But you need to keep on training yourself, because as José Antonio Marina says, this is the learning era, and the one who doesn't learn is going to be discarded. So we need to experiment with technology. You need to experiment in order to see what you can do with technology. And you cannot forget what Peter Drucker said. If we want to predict the future, the best way is that we make it up ourselves. That is why I want to remind you that at this moment in Spain, 31% of companies attacked, which have cybersecurity attacks, do not even know about it, because only in 10 companies devotes enough budget to cybersecurity. And what is the cost of that in our country by 2021? A cost of 5.4 trillions of euros, and we cannot afford that. It is said it is a state problem. Of course it is, and it is also going to bring problems to companies which are already committing themselves to this field, and this is going to bring growth and employment. But what's going on? The employment in cybersecurity is going to be 3 times fold, but by 2020, unfortunately, we also expect that in Europe there will be 350,000 positions uncovered. In the whole world, this figure will be 1.5 million. So there will be many job positions, and we need to train yourselves in order to hold those positions. Do you want security? Then let's commit ourselves to cybersecurity. Thank you very much.
Y como nos quedan,
Since we have 10 minutes left, I wanted to ask you, does anyone want to ask me any question? Do you have any questions? If you don't, you can go home. If you don't have any questions, that means I explained myself perfectly clear. Okay, in that case, thank you very much and see you soon.